Okay, let's dive in. Today we've got a really interesting source document to unpack. It's a presentation all about the national mission on saffron in Jammu and Kashmir. Our goal here is to sort of pull out the key insights, trace the story of this amazing spice from its history through some tough times and into this big national effort to bring it back.
And the history is, well, it's really something. The source mentions saffron and cashmere going back as far as 500 BC, maybe even earlier. There's this hint, of Persian influence potentially.
Yeah,
It's more than just a crop. It's really woven into the culture there.
500 BC. Wow, that's seriously ancient. But the source makes it clear it wasn't all smooth sailing, right? What was the situation before this mission kicked off?
Yeah, it was frankly a bit of a worrying picture. The source describes a pretty significant decline. The area planted with saffron, it shrunk from like 5,700 hectares down to just over 3,700 by 2009-10. That's a lot less land being used for saffron.
And less land usually means less product, but I think the source also mentioned the yield per hectare dropped too.
Exactly. That's the double whammy. The average yield fell from about 3.13 kilos per hectare historically down to a concerning 1.88 kilos per hectare right before 2010. So, yeah, less area and getting less saffron from the area they still had.
And this wasn't just numbers on a page, it affected real people. The source says over 30,000 families across hundreds of villages.
That's right. 226 villages in J&K.
Yeah.
Families depending on this. And you have to remember, J&K is the only place in India that grows saffron. Globally, it's the second biggest producer. So this decline wasn't just, an agricultural issue. It was a threat to this unique heritage crop and all those livelihoods.
Okay, so what did the source say was causing this decline? What was the core problem?
The main thing they pointed to, according to this presentation, was the production system itself. They called it orthodox cultivation methods. Basically, the traditional ways weren't keeping up. That was seen as the main constraint on productivity. Of course, there were other factors too. Things like biotic and abiotic stresses, pests, diseases, weather issues, poor plant stand, not enough plants per area, and definitely the impact of changing weather patterns.
Right, so you've got this incredibly important ancient crop supporting tens of thousands, but it's struggling. Outdated methods, environmental pressures, it really sets the scene for needing some kind of major intervention. Which brings us to the national mission on saffron. When did that start and what were they trying to achieve?
So that kicked off in 2010-11. It was under a bigger umbrella scheme called Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, or KVY. Our KVY is basically a national program to boost agriculture in different states. And this mission's specific goal was the economic revival of J&K saffron.
Revival. Okay, so more than just stopping the decline. What were the actual objectives?
Well, they aimed for improvement on a few fronts. First, boosting production both vertically, maybe more yield per hectare, and horizontally, maybe getting more land effectively cultivated. Second, a big focus on improving the quality of the saffron. That's crucial. Third, strengthening research and extension. So, improving the science behind saffron growing and making sure farmers actually get that information.
And getting it to market, too. That seems like a key piece often missed.
Absolutely vital. The fourth objective was exactly that, developing organized marketing systems. Things like quality-based pricing, making sure farmers get paid fairly for better saffron, and facilitating direct links between the growers and the traders, exporters, industries, cutting out unnecessary middlemen, basically.
That sounds pretty comprehensive. What kind of scale are we talking? How much money, how much area?
The idea was to rejuvenate those 315 hectares that were under cultivation but declining. The total project cost sanctioned was pretty substantial, 400.1 crore rupees. Most of that, about 316 crore, came from the government of India. The rest, around 84 crore, was the farmers' expected contribution.
And the timeline. I think the document mentioned a couple of different end dates.
Yeah, it initially mentioned 9 years, from 2010 to 2020. Then there's a note about a 2-year extension, approved around 2018-19, which seems to confirm the 2019-20 completion target, or 2010-2020 as the full period. And as of when the document was put together, a good chunk of the money had been released, about 235 crore, and mostly spent.
Okay, got it. So they had the money, the goals. How did they actually plan to change things on the ground, move away from those orthodox methods?
Right. The presentation highlighted some specific recommended practices. For growing, they looked at what works elsewhere, like in Iran and Spain. There's this pluriannual method. Instead of leaving the corms, the bulb-like things underground indefinitely, you let them grow for 2 years, then dig them up and replant the healthy ones. It's more active management.
So managing the corms better, not just leaving them.
Exactly. And being picky about which corms you plant. They recommended using graded corms, bigger ones like 8 grams or more, for new plantings. They tend to grow better. Another huge thing was irrigation. The source really emphasizes using sprinkler irrigation, especially in September and October. Getting water to the corms, then, is critical for them to sprout properly and give you a good flower yield.
Water at the right time. Makes sense. And after picking the flowers, what about handling them? Drying and all that?
Yes, that's where quality can really be made or broken. The mission pushed for modern drying, using things like specialized toasters, electric dryers, or even vacuum dryers. These give you much more control compared to, say, just drying them in the sun, and they help preserve the saffron's quality.
So better growing, better drying. What other kinds of support did the mission offer? It wasn't just advice, right?
No, it was quite broad. Support for infrastructure, digging tube wells, setting up those sprinkler systems, helping produce good quality planting material, the corms we talked about, improving post-harvest handling generally. Mechanization was part of it too. They distributed things like weeders, even tractors, trying to reduce some of the really hard manual labor.
You're bringing in machinery? Okay.
Yep. Plus upgrading public farms, setting up weather stations for better climate info, and developing systems for e-trading. We'll probably get into that. Quality testing, getting ISO certification, which is important for international markets, and crucially, training. Transferring the technology, training farmers, even training the officials involved. Human resource development, they called it.
That scale of investment, especially in infrastructure and training, seems to point towards something the source presents as really central. The Saffron Park. What is that and where?
That's the Indy International Kashmir Saffron Trade Center, IIKSTC for short. It's at Dusu in Pampur, which is like the heartland of saffron country. The presentation mentioned it was supposed to be up and running around 2018-19. It's designed as the main hub for everything after the saffron is picked.
So why build this one big facility? What makes it so important?
Well, it kind of tackles several problems at once. First, it allows for proper scientific post-harvest handling, drying, grading, separating the stigma carefully. Second, and this is huge, it enforces quality standards. By testing and grading the saffron there, you can finally link the price directly to the quality, right at the farm gate level. Farmers get rewarded for better quality. It's also a major tool to fight adulteration, fake or low-quality stuff being passed off as Kashmiri saffron. Regular testing and certification helps prevent that. And finally, it's the physical location for the e-trading platform, connecting all those growers to a much wider market.
It really sounds like the nerve center for modernizing the whole trade. Can we walk through what happens inside based on the source, like when the flowers first arrive at the collection center?
Sure. So flowers come in, they get weighed, coded, tagged. Traceability is key here for quality control, right?
Yeah.
Records are kept. Then they're sent to the separation unit. If there's too much coming in at once, some can go into cold storage temporarily. They use basic stuff like weighing scales and conveyor belts here.
Cold storage for flowers. Didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, for a short time. The cold storage unit mentioned holds them in crates, maybe 4 kilos each, capacity up to 2 tons. Needs very specific conditions, though, 0 to 5 degrees Celsius and really high humidity, 90–95%. Just holds them before they can be processed.
Okay. Then they go to get the valuable part out the red threads, the stigma separation unit.
Exactly. Fresh flowers come in, big emphasis on hygiene for the workers, the farmers doing the separating. They get assigned to these separation tables. The source mentions 72 motorized ones seating over 400 people. A conveyor brings the flowers, speed controlled. They separate the stigma, which then gets weighed again before heading off to be dried. They use things like pallet trucks to move stuff around.
And somewhere in here is the quality lab. That sounds critical.
Absolutely critical. This is where the science really kicks in. Coded samples come from the drying unit. They run physical and chemical tests using standard Indian methods, IS methods, to get accurate results. Based on those tests, they assign the quality grades following international ISO standards. This lab generates that all-important certificate that says this batch is grade X, which is then linked to the saffron when it's sold on the e-auction.
What kind of things are they testing for? What makes one batch grade A and another grade B?
They check for physical stuff first, like is there any other plant matter mixed in? Extraneous matter, they call it. But the big ones are the chemical compounds. Picrocrosin, that gives the bitterness or flavor precursor. Saffronal, that's the aroma. And crucin, that's the color. Higher levels of those generally mean better quality. They also check moisture content. Too high is bad, and specifically test for artificial colorants to catch fakes. The lab has some serious kit. Analytical balances for tiny weights, UV-vis spectrophotometers to measure compound concentration using light, and HPLC high-performance liquid chromatography, which is great for separating out and identifying specific chemicals.
Wow, yeah, that's not just looking at it, that's detailed analysis. So after testing, it gets dried.
Or rather, samples go for testing after drying. The fresh stigma goes to the drying unit first. Its weight is logged, then it goes into the dryers. They have controlled procedures to make sure it's dried properly, safely, preserving quality. Samples are taken for the lab. The source mentions vacuum dryers, specifically 4 of them. Each can take quite a bit, 9 kilos of fresh stigma, and dry it fast, in like 40 minutes. Vacuum drying is good because it works at lower temperatures, which helps keep those volatile aroma and flavor compounds intact.
40 minutes. That's way faster than traditional methods, I bet, and much more consistent. Okay, finally, packaging.
Right. Dried stigma comes in, gets weighed one last time. Using that certificate from the lab, it gets packaged. The source mentions 2 packing lines just for the small packs. Consumers might buy 1 gram, 2 grams, 5 grams. They've got machinery for cleaning the containers, filling them accurately by weight, capping, labeling, and they keep logbooks so every package can be traced back. Full traceability.
This whole system in the park, the testing, grading, certification, it seems perfectly set up to enable this e-trading idea. Why was an online auction so necessary? What was wrong before?
The source lays out the problems pretty clearly. Growers were stuck in local markets, often didn't even know who potential buyers were across India. They rarely knew if they were getting a fair price, the real market price, and getting paid could take ages. Buyers, on the other hand, often had to physically go to Kashmir to be sure they were getting the real deal and to negotiate price. Inefficient for everyone.
So the e-auction was designed to fix all that, bridge the gap.
Pretty much. The source lists a whole bunch of benefits. For the sellers, the farmers, and auctioneers, it's easier to follow rules, faster to list their saffron, they can adjust prices, monitor sales, see market trends, and importantly, faster payment, all GSTs compliant.
And for buyers logging in from Mumbai or Delhi or wherever.
Big advantages, too. One registration gets them access to saffron auctions across India. Easy to see what's available. Tools like trackers, auto bidding. They can see the market depth, how much total saffron is on offer. And crucially, they bid anonymously. That helps ensure fair price discovery, less chance of collusion, plus smoother payments, and they get the delivery order right away once it's paid for.
It really does sound like a leap forward from that fragmented, almost opaque system to something centralized, transparent, digital. So with all this in place, the new farming methods, the Saffron Park, the e-trading, what results did the mission actually see? Did productivity go up?
The presentation definitely highlights a positive impact where the new methods were adopted. It explicitly states that growers using the scientific methods in the rejuvenated areas saw a really dramatic jump in productivity. Remember that pre-mission average was about 1.8 kilos per hectare. In those rejuvenated plots, it went up to 500 kilos per hectare.
Wow, 1.8 up to 5. That's nearly triple the yield. In those specific areas using the new techniques, that really shows the potential.
It certainly does. And the source also makes a point to reiterate the quality aspect. It compares Kashmir Saffron to Iranian, noting Kashmir's has significantly higher crocin, that's the color compound, 8.72%, Van's 6.82%, and points out the physical difference too, the long, thick stigma, reinforcing it's a special heritage crop with a measurable difference.
Although, looking at the overall production table in the source, the picture seems a bit more mixed over the years. There are ups and downs.
Yes, that's true. That table shows the overall figures for the whole mission area. While the potential in those improved plots is clear, the average across all areas is still subject to other factors. The source itself points out environmental shocks had an impact, like the big floods in 2014-15 and a really bad dry spell in 2017-18. Those definitely pulled the average yields down in those years.
Right, so modernization helps, but you can't control the weather. What other challenges or constraints did the source mention were still problems for the mission?
They listed a few key ones. Delays in getting the allocated funds released, which can always slow things down. Another ongoing issue, saffron land being converted for other uses, housing, roads, whatever. Non-agricultural use. That shrinks the potential area. And they also highlighted a structural thing, the need for a dedicated irrigation division just for saffron to make sure the new irrigation systems are maintained properly long-term.
Any specific money issues mentioned, like debts or funding gaps?
Yeah, briefly. It noted some liabilities, funds still owed for some of the rejuvenation work. Also, it mentioned that some unspent mission money had actually been diverted to finish the Saffron Park, and that needed to be sorted out financially, recouped later. And some costs related to irrigation being handled by a different department. just administrative hurdles, it seems.
Okay, so we've really covered a lot ground here, tracing this whole story from the source document. We've seen the deep history of Kashmiri saffron, the really worrying decline it faced, and then this huge, multifaceted response through the national mission. A major investment in technology, infrastructure like the Saffron Park, new farming techniques, and a whole new way of trading it through the e-auction.
It's a fascinating case study, isn't it? A concerted effort to take a traditional, high-value, culturally significant crop and really try to secure its future using modern science and market systems.
Absolutely. And it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? You have this blend of ancient tradition, thousands of years of cultivation, meaning things like vacuum dryers, chemical analysis, digital auctions. So the question to maybe ponder is, what are the long-term implications here? How do you successfully modernize the cultivation and trade of something so deeply traditional like Kashmiri saffron? How do you strike that balance between bringing in the technology needed to survive and thrive economically, supporting all those families, while also ensuring you preserve the unique essence, that difference the source talked about, that makes it so valuable in the first place?